is the moment we've all been waiting for the thousands in attendance and the millions watching around the world. Ladies and gentlemen, let's get ready to rumble!
I think if he does go into a coma, you would give the authorization for him to be intravenously fed?
No, he told me not to. It's a sad thing to say, and I would feel I love my son just like any other mother does, but I wouldn't. I can't. He asked me not to, and I've promised him not to.
ice, so you could wipe off that grin. I know where you've been. It's all been a pack of lies. And I can feel it coming in the air tonight. Oh Lord, well I've been waiting for this moment for all my life. Oh Lord.
We have seen today the funeral of a man who took his own life, either by his own decision or because those behind him felt it was in the interest of their cause that he should die. Whatever the reason, it was a tragedy that he should have added his name to the list of those in Northern Ireland who have died as a result of a campaign which can contribute.
Where am I? Can you see me? Welcome back to Lessons for Life. It's Thursday night and we passed an important anniversary not long ago. It was Karl Marx's birthday, which we celebrated, but it was also the anniversary of the death of Bobby Sands, MP, hunger striker. I'm just going to sort this picture out. 1 minute, Brian, sorry. Okay. Okay, that's a bit better. Where were we? Right, welcome back. It's Lessons for Life, and a couple of days ago we passed an important anniversary. It clashed with Karl Marx's birthday, so I focused on that, but I didn't want to miss addressing the anniversary of the death of MP Bobby Sands, who in 1981, 39 years ago, passed away after 66 days of hunger strike. And I've got a friend of the channel and personal friend of mine, Brian. He's phoning me from Ireland and he's something of an expert on Irish history. And you were just saying, Brian, you were young at the time and you can vaguely remember the black flags flying in remembrance of Bobby Sands.
Julian.
Welcome back, mate. Thank you.
That would be my reaction. Like, the one thing I remember was that because there was actually a couple of families that had come from the 6 counties during the pogroms in the late 60s, and they'd settled in Waterford.
This is when
they had the black flags, and then kind of traditional Republican families had the black flags. Yeah.
So late 60s, Catholic areas were burnt out by loyalist mobs, and people had to flee. Yeah. Is that right?
So that's right. You had a lot of people. Like there's a town in Clare. It's called Shannon Town, and it's basically, we'll say, 60% of the town by the airport, Shannon Airport, is from Belfast.
Really? And these are refugees in a way, or internally displaced people?
It was. I suppose you could call it internal displacement because, you know, it's one island, like. But
that's why I was careful with my language there, because some people think that the 26th county are a completely different entity. But from if you're of a nationalist mind, and I'm also reluctant to use the religious language because it was people targeted for their religion or religious background, but the Republican movement has never spoken in terms of sectarian language, and we said before there's always been and will always be Protestant Irish nationalists, and Bobby Sands himself was even of a mixed background. I believe his grandfather was a Protestant who was felt as betrayed by the British state as any Catholic on the island of Ireland might have.
My great grandfather was Protestant as well. The 6th county in particular, there's a lot of cross marrying, and it wasn't so much a problem in a lot of areas. I mean, if you look at where Bobby was born, Rathcoole was a mixed area. He was brought up in tenements that were built there, and he was on a football team that was a mixed football team. He ran with the Rathcoole Harriers, I think they were the Athletics club. You know, he was kind of an apolitical kid who just wanted to play football and do athletics, and things started to change towards the late 60s. And in the Rathcoole area, there was a group called the KAIs, and they were these guys in tartan pants and denim jackets, and they'd march in formation. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I'm with you. Thank you.
They'd march in formation up and down the street. You know, the KAIs was Kill All Irish. It was just a gang. They were kind of like.
And they wore tartan. These are tartan gangs. Did they also call them tartan gangs? Wow.
Tartan pants on and kind of these denim jackets or army jackets.
Wow.
March around. So when trouble started in the late 60s, Rathcoole had a small nationalist Catholic population living in the area, you know. And what they used to have was Bobby's experience of his first experience of the fact that he was different was that his neighbour's house, there was a Catholic family, and one night this woman came up with a young couple, and they walked up and they went into the neighbour's house. They didn't go indoors. They just started looking in the windows. They were looking at the garden. They were checking the house out. These people kind of got the nickname of being loyalist estate agents. What the woman was doing was showing them this house and was saying to this young couple, well, you know what? Do you want that house? If you want that house, we'll give it to you. And we'll get the family that's in it out. So this all started happening. You had all these marching up and down the street, singing sectarian songs. And then Bobby himself, I think he was working with Belfast Bus, City Bus. And I think his father worked there before him, and one day he was opening up his locker and there was a bullet in the locker with a message kind of basically telling them to get lost. Wow. So these are these kind of formative years and experiences. So after that, he started becoming more political, obviously.
I think that would politicise anyone. But what made an integrated area like that, with people playing on mixed football teams and even mixed marriages, why did it descend into sectarianism? I've heard loyalists blame the civil rights movement, as if people demanding equality was bound to annoy someone.
Yeah, I mean, it's a strange thing. They have this kind of upside down view of the world in some ways, you know, the very staunch loyalist apologists, like, you know, they can't have it both ways. I mean, they at the time they were afraid. Like, I mean, in the 1950s there'd been the border campaign, and the border campaign hadn't been a success. So the fear of the IRA didn't seem much. The IRA didn't have the ability to change events in the 6 counties. They didn't have that ability. They didn't have that support. But then this happened, and I mean, there's a lot of things. I mean, it was civil rights. It was the failure to allow for a university in Derry City that pushed a lot of people towards the civil rights movement, that kind of started the civil rights movement. I mean, if Stormont had given the university that I think they put in Coleraine, and they'd put it in Derry, there may not have been a civil rights movement.
And the civil rights movement was a non-violent movement, from what I understand, civil disobedience, inspired by the likes of Rosa Parks and the black civil rights movement in America.
Yeah, and I mean, it had a broad spectrum of people involved. I mean, you had people from Protestant people, you had Catholic people, you had leftists, you had church people, you had, you know, there was a broad spectrum. I mean, you obviously would have had people from a Republican background. It was such a wide net that it cast. But it's
the quote I've got on the screen now, Brian. If I just sorry to interrupt. I've got the quote on the screen that says, "Everyone, Republican or otherwise, has his or her own part to play," and that is attributed to Bobby Sands.
Yeah. I mean, if you think about Bobby's legacy, when you think about republicanism, Irish republicanism, if you're coming from an internationalist point of view in terms of socialists as well, I mean, there's two names jump out from Irish republicanism as kind of socialist thinkers, as political thinkers, as people who would influence beyond the border of Ireland, beyond the island of Ireland, and that would be, Bobby Sands and James Connolly.
Yes.
And those two people, so they're very similar people in terms of, I mean, Bobby probably wouldn't have started out as a Marxist, he wouldn't have started out as a socialist, but Long Kesh and the H-blocks and these prison camps became universities, almost like the Sorbonne, in Paris, in 68, they became these kind of hotbed of political discussion. And Bobby and people like that in the prisons became almost disenchanted with the old Republicans, and they began to generate a lot more of a push towards different political philosophies in terms of leftist philosophies. So they would have read books about Mao, Ho Chi Minh. They would have been looking at Leninists, Trotskyists. They would have looked at different philosophies and eventually arrived at something that didn't just molded kind of republicanism with this Marxist leftist ideology, which you would think, in terms of the real history of republicanism, that is an all-encompassing, non-sectarian view. If you get me?
Yes, of course.
So that's where, and that kind of sits back to that. There's been moments in the history of the six counties where there's been opportunities that weren't taken, where you could have united people under a banner of socialism rather than the separate banners of Catholicism and Protestantism, or Unionist and Nationalist.
Yeah, divide and conquer.
And exactly, and it wasn't taken. And it's as much for the nationalist community to be blamed for that. No one should be a person blamed for that. It's just it was an opportunity lost. But there's always been strong Presbyterian Republicans, Protestant Republicans in Belfast, and even up in the 1930s there was a group, they were called a special group, and they basically were leftists, communists, and they lived in East Belfast and they lived on the Shankill, and they were trusted with a lot of operations because they were not untouchable, but they didn't rouse the same suspicion as notable volunteers from West Belfast or from Ardine. So they weren't, under the same kind of pressure. So they were given a lot of work to do. But kind of the early days of the Troubles kind of changed everything when you got into this kind of tit for tat thing. And I do believe, from reading Bobby Sands and that he and a lot of the Republican leadership were against that, and they didn't want that. But it was almost like it's that kind of thing that when it starts, it's impossible to stop it.
I've heard people coin the term defenderism, as in it was people reverting back to what the defenders were, who were an agrarian Catholic defence association, you could say, rather than the United Irishmen, who were an all-encompassing and largely Protestant in origin, Presbyterian in particular, organisation. But yeah, that's the divide and conquer. I do always like to remind people there have always been Republicans from all backgrounds, and the name escapes me. Who founded the INLA? Ronnie Bunting, was he of a Protestant background?
Very good question, sure.
Some of these hardcore leftists would have been as you say, politics before religion. But let's get into the prison now. What was going on in the prison? You said people were learning. I know people were studying language. The Irish language was alive. They call it the jail tucht.
Yeah, it became like a university, like any kind of fervent leftist university in Europe at the time. I mean, that's a lot of the reason that you had people, you know, beyond Ireland became interested in people like Bobby Sands and their struggle, because they identified with that same kind of politics.
Yeah.
Maybe not with the nationalism or the republicanism, but they definitely, the universities became these hotbeds for, okay, what are we doing here? We're fighting for what? We're fighting for civil rights? Are we fighting for United Ireland? But if we get United Ireland, what's that going to look like?
What will that
look like? The Ireland where the captains of industry get to do what they want and the landlords keep screwing everyone, or is it going to be the workers' paradise? You know, is it going to be what the lads, what they kind of the socialist utopia? And that's the kind of thing that was happening in prisons at the time. You had this big discussion going on.
What do you think Bobby's vision of that united Ireland would have been?
You know, like, I mean, you think a lot of politicians go on, or a lot of people go on a journey. I mean, the likes of Bobby and that, they're these bright flames that burn very, very brightly, and then they burn out because they make that sacrifice. Connolly, people like that, and other people take on their name and they run with it, and they use that name and they use that person's legacy to kind of further their own political beliefs. I mean, the Bobby Sands of the 70s and the early 80s was a person who believed in a redistribution of wealth and land and a push for a more equal society. Now, had Bobby survived and had he grown over the years, would he remained that, you know, holding on to that Marxist ideal to the bitter end, or would he become a more pragmatic kind of person? Would he have gone down the route of Martin McGuinness and Gerry Adams? That's a question we'll never know. I think, you know, the men who are prepared to die, usually, if they are more hardened in their beliefs, they're not going to make that pragmatic step. So I think, like, what he wanted was an Ireland that was, you know, possibly looking like a more democratic version of Cuba, like, you know, less, you know, I don't know what he would have envisaged, a central committee looking after the country, or democracy where you just had leftist parties to pick from. I don't know.
Well, I was just thinking, it's sometimes, I know you say that the hardliners are willing to die, but sometimes it's the moderates who other people allow them to die. And in the end, Bobby Sands was allowed to die by Margaret Thatcher. I'm thinking of Michael Collins, who said that he signed his own death warrant. And even in the Middle Eastern conflict, I can think of presidents who have been assassinated for not being extreme enough. Sometimes the people that take the middle road make the ultimate sacrifice.
That's true as well. I mean, I think it's the most honest type of people usually end up dead or in prison, you know. The political survivors, the cute whores, as they call them in Ireland, they manage their way to the finishing line, and they pick up all the gold. Well, the other poor devils that perhaps did all the struggling get left behind. I mean, there's that issue in the six counties. If they're, you know, there's people that feel very much left behind, that they would they would say they have ownership over Bobby's legacy, and they're not happy with the state of things. And then you have Sinn Féin, and Sinn Féin claim Bobby's legacy, and they're pushing their political All-Ireland agenda. And then you have the more dissident groups that would also claim it. And
do you think there's anyone that can rightfully lay claim to his legacy?
I think Bobby Sands' legacy belongs to the people of Ireland, and no political party has any kind of right to him. I mean, obviously the liberal, neoliberal mainstream parties in the southern part of the country don't want to be associated with him because it brings up uncomfortable questions and uncomfortable discussions. But leftist parties and leftist people, he belongs to them. He belongs to that idea that you have an Ireland that's going to be just and equal, where workers' rights will be respected. That you won't be in the middle of we'll say for an example, to use recent news, you won't be bussing in or bringing in a Ryanair flight of Bulgarian workers to pick your strawberries and treating them like dirt in the middle of an epidemic or pandemic. You know what I mean? That's that kind of, and then shoving 40 foreign national workers into a two-bedroomed house on the outskirts of Dublin to make as much money as you can out of people. The Bewley's workers all being laid off today for Dublin's oldest tea house, all being laid off today because Johnny Ronan, who went bankrupt during the crash, wants his rent to be continued to be paid. So it's forcing the company to shut down. You know what I mean? These rich captains of industry, the William Martin Murphys, these people, they are in direct opposition to the Ireland that Bobby Sands wanted.
Yeah.
It was an Ireland that was going to, be one youth for the youth, and it didn't come to be, obviously, because poor man, basically.
Thank you, Brian. I don't want to take too much of your time tonight. I just want to remind us all that there were 9 other brave men that followed behind him, and Bobby was just the first one to go, and he said, I know I will die, but I hope I'm the only one. So he's always been the name that we remember the most, perhaps. But 9 others followed him, and they were fighting for a united Ireland. We haven't got there yet, and if we do, I hope it doesn't look like the picture you're describing of the Free State, as they would call it. What vision, what hope is there for realising their wishes, and how will it look in reality?
Yeah, well, I tell you, look, this is the thing. I mean, you have strange alliances after United Ireland that will seem impossible, but just, to say in Irish politics, you have Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael, 2 parties that would have declared themselves polar opposites, or having a very bizarre wedding and marrying each other in this coalition, which is very neoliberal based, and in order to keep Sinn Féin out, and consequently, I think they made Sinn Féin the opposition party. And
that was amazing.
In the next election, I would see, purely because neoliberalism mismanages every single resource in your country, so it destroys things. It can't help itself. So, as a political philosophy, it just upsets people. And I think because of that, Sinn Féin will see themselves coming to power after the next election, and that'll be interesting time, because what kind of Ireland are they going to build? Are they going to stay true to? Sinn Féin, probably more than any other party, use Bobby Sands' image, because it's an international image. It's an image that is, you know, streets in Tehran, streets in Brittany, all named after Bobby Sands. Revolutionaries read about him. They read his writing now. Some people would read Lenin or Trotsky and stuff like that. So, you know, I mean, I've got friends who are in prison, and one of the books in Palestine on their wing, one of the books they have is Bobby Sands' book. You know, so he has an international dimension to him. Will Sinn Féin stay true to that dream that he had? Will they have to be more pragmatic? Will they have to buy into, like a lot of leftist governments do, like in Greece, to the IMF's way of doing things? Are we on the verge of seeing a kind of the world turning against that liberal vision? You know,
I sense you're reluctantly accepting that Sinn Féin are the only party who can lay claim to his legacy. You spoke to George Galloway shortly after the Sinn Féin brilliant performance in the election, and he was very impressed with what you said. George Galloway is in the midst of starting a new workers' party in Britain. Yes, a new leftist party. Do you think there is the need for a new party that could carry the mantle of Bobby Sands in Ireland, or will Sinn Féin do if they stay true to their word and their roots?
You can't fault Sinn Féin's logic. If you're a dissident, I can understand dissidents. I can understand why they're annoyed. I mean, the Good Friday Agreement is the Sunningdale Agreement.
Yeah.
And if you accept that the Good Friday Agreement's okay, what was wrong with the Sunningdale Agreement, and why were we fighting for an extra 20 years? So I can see where dissidents are coming from. I can see that the objectives of the IRA haven't been obtained. However, Sinn Féin's strategy has always been, I would say, a little bit more pragmatic and long-term, in terms that they see political advancement in the 26 counties, and being power sharing in the 6 counties means that over the entirety of the island, they are the most formidable force. Fine Gael know this, Fianna Fáil know this, the DUP know this. They know that this entity, that is Sinn Féin, has the ability to become the most powerful political entity on the country, of the whole island. And because of that, they're very fearful. Very worried about it, because you know, Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael obviously they have no footing in the 6 counties, and the DUP have no footing in the southern counties. So I mean, if you come to a united Ireland, Sinn Féin become a robust political powerhouse, much like Fianna Fáil were for the first 70 years of the Free State and the Irish Republic. So there's fear of that. Will they deliver on what they promise? I think ideologically they are more likely to deliver than Fáil or Fine Gael. And Fáil and Fine Gael have bought in completely to neoliberalism and neoliberal economics. So,
if it came down to it, would Fianna Fáil be more likely to cooperate with Sinn Féin and have some kind of a coalition than Fine Gael?
I think grassroots members found it more palatable for Fianna Fáil to join Sinn Féin than to join Fine Gael.
Well, they call themselves the United Ireland Party, don't they? Not that they've done much in the way of making it happen.
A case of it was raise the green flag for votes. We're going to unite the country, lads.
Okay.
So, you know,
we'll get Brexit done.
But they had no intention of it. But I think what you've picked up on something interesting there is that Fianna Fáil, a lot of Fianna Fáil membership, grassroots people, may find Sinn Féin a more ideologically similar to them than, you know, the Fianna Fáil, which is about to join Fine Gael right now. So I think you'll see a lot of defections from old school Republican Fianna Fáil supporters will jump ship and will support, especially in the next election. I think you'll see a lot of Fianna Fáil voters. Fianna Fáil's vote's going to disappear, and it will go to Sinn Féin, and all because their leader Micheál Martin is just dying to be the Taoiseach, and he's not even going to be Taoiseach. I think he's going to be a revolving Taoiseach with Leo Varadkar, which is just ridiculous and pointless in the extreme. But it's going to destroy Fianna Fáil, which means I can see a lot of Fianna Fáil votes, young Fianna Fáil voters, just being absorbed into Sinn Féin, and Sinn Féin becoming the largest party by the time the next election comes around.
Wow. Well, look, Brian, here comes my final question. At the next election, how many seats in the Dáil do you think the DUP will win? That's my question.
That's brilliant. Do you know what? I'd say they get a couple of seats in certain parts of Dublin.
Well, okay, yeah, it's funny, but they'd be better off, surely, being a quarter of the Dáil or a fifth or whatever they'd be, than being a tiny little proportion of the UK Parliament debating issues that have nothing to do with their people in their everyday lives.
Yeah, absolutely. That it makes perfect sense to you, to me, but when your whole identity is the flag and the crown, I mean, I just can't see them buying into it. I mean, they have to. I mean, really, they're a conservative Fine Gael. Like, Fine Gael are very, I would say, they're liberal on social issues, only because it suits them. Their Fine Gael are very neoliberal. They believe in the free market. I mean, they've undertaken they've turned Ireland into the most open market, free market country in Europe, I'd say, in the last 10 years.
Where is this left-wing republic that people fought so hard for and died for? Where is it?
Well, that's the thing. Like, every time you have a revolution, immediately after that revolution, you either take complete control and you impose your will, or the bankers, the newspaper men, the landowners, the factory owners, they all come back in. Like, they will go on the run for a year or two, but they'll come back in and they'll cash in. It happens every single time. Like, William Martin Murphy was a citizen of the British Empire, and then he was a citizen of the Free State, and nothing changed. There was, he was still part of the problem that was Ireland in the 1920s. A landlord. Just because the state had changed its name didn't mean that these people had disappeared. They still exploited workers. They still went after people. I mean, that's the key thing. Like, if Sinn Féin did win, would we be seeing a situation where and here's the thing, Ireland's become so middle class, that it wants things, it desires things. So, for example, people want their Keeling strawberries. Does it matter if they've been picked by somebody who's on minimum wage, or does it matter that it's been picked by somebody who's been paid half the minimum wage, but it's because they're from another country? You know what I mean? It all comes down to a sense of what do you want as a country. I mean, the changes that the world is going to experience in the next 20 years, Bobby Sands' view of the world is going to suit that better, I think, than
I hope so.
The political opposites, the neoliberal ones, because the neoliberalism is destroying the planet. It's creating thousands of Chernobyls in terms of health epidemics and famines all over the world. So I think people, now that the bubble has been burst in the West with this virus, I think you're going to see a lot more people going towards Bobby Sands rather than Boris Johnson or Leo Varadkar's vision.
I hope so. And he said our revenge will be our children's laughter, right? He was thinking about the next generation. And those children are parents themselves now. And it saddens me to think Bobby has now been dead longer than he lived. He was in his 20s when he passed away, and my goodness, the world has changed. I just hope we can embrace his vision of what a world might be like. Brian, I really appreciate the call, my friend. Thank you very much.
Oh, thank you, Sean. It's always good talk.
Wonderful. Well done, mate. Thank you very much.
We'll have a chat ourselves over the weekend, all right?
Yeah, lovely. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Okay, brother.
Cheers, brother. See you.
Slán go fóill.
Thank you, brother. Slán Nabil. There goes Brian. Yeah, my goodness. What a world it is, and how much has changed since 1981. I was born in the 80s. It doesn't feel like it was that long ago, but the world has changed. The world has got smaller, and we need to change the system. Bobby Sands had a different idea in mind, and I think we can do justice to his legacy if we take a leaf out of his book. Thank you for joining me tonight. It's been an important one for me. I know it's quite specific, but I couldn't let the anniversary go by without commemorating the passing of Bobby Sands. So this has been Lessons for Life, and we will do it all again soon. Thank you for joining me. We were here, and we are gone. Latest.